Fire Call, the Fire Safety Show, Division Chief Jim Sideras.
Hi, my name is Division Chief Jim Sideras, and you are watching Fire Call. Hey, this month we got a wild show for you. We're going to take you to a two-alarm fire with an explosion going on, and then we're going to talk about something that you can do to save someone's life using a public access Defib. We got our best buddy, Dr. Watt from Heart Hospital. He's going to take you behind the scenes on how those things work and why they're so important. But first, got some shout-outs. Now, these shout-outs come from all over, and you're not going to believe this batch. First one's from James. James wants a shout-out to the Carmel Volunteer Fire Department in Carmel, New York. And a new favorite, Jason. Jason wants a shout-out to the firefighters at Camp Black Horse, Afghanistan. Jason's in the South Dakota Army National Guard, and they're watching Fire Call in Afghanistan. Now, of course, we answer your questions, give you a shout-out, you get a sassy Sioux Falls Fire Rescue t-shirt. Don't be emailing me about when you're going to get them. We send them when we can. Now, sit back, shut off all electronic stuff except for what you're watching right now, and hang tight and ride with the firefighters at Sioux Falls Fire Rescue.
We have a two-story commercial occupancy, unknown type of construction. We have heavy fire showing on the alpha side. Give me a second alarm to this call, please. Unknown occupancy status.
We're here at a two-alarm fire that started off with an explosion that spread rapidly to the buildings. Crews had to be called in from around the city. Now we have Captain Todd Lowe off Rescue 5. Now, Todd, you were first in on this fire, and right down the street from your station. It was a pretty good fire. What did you see when you first got here?
Well, the first thing I noticed, and that as soon as leaving the station, that the amount of fire that was present for the time of day, areas occupied, and we had heavy flames and heavy fire involvement at the time of leaving the station. So not knowing for sure what had occurred at that time, I knew immediately we had something out of the ordinary take place to cause that much fire development in that short period of time. So I recognized the need that we're going to need additional resources, and I requested a second alarm.
When you see that, you're going just by yours as a captain, you know what you've got, you see you have adjoining buildings. Is that kind of what your thought process was on this?
Absolutely. Standard, best recommended practices at all times is we use that term RECIO, right, as you've talked about in other programs before, and that priority and establishing those incident priorities remains the same, and but we just prioritize based on what we have, and hopefully that our initial assessment and how we direct our crews will stop the fire spread. And hopefully
now this is pretty much textbook of all the cases we talk about, the strip fire, the strip mall fire, and this is a strip mall adjoining buildings. What was your first priority and second priority when you first got here?
Well, the consideration that I had to make at the time when I first arrived was the amount of fire that I had present.
Right in the center, too, of this whole strip mall.
That is correct. And then, the consideration for the decision that I had to make was I was certain at that time that something really out of the ordinary occurred to have that much fire development at this time of the day. And so I had my choice between if I didn't feel it was safe already to enter the exposures that were affected, so it was my thought to hopefully set up for master streams as soon as I possibly could to get it knocked down to a controllable level and then make entry into the exposures on each side. Had the fire been smaller, the decision I may have elected to go directly into those exposures, but the amount of fire present initially, and we did have a little breeze out of the east, pushing towards the west, and there was already fire involvement in those exposures. So.
Now, when you think about RECIO, the first one's rescue, and I know we've had a little bit of a language barrier going on. Then it was exposure. So what you're talking about is keeping this thing from spreading throughout this whole structure.
That is correct. So as I go through the incident priorities based on what I observed when I first arrived, I looked at exposures, and as soon as command arrived, as early into the incident, I identified an area where we thought we could make a definitive stop, and identified exposures on each side as an area where we're going to stop the fire.
This direction to the east.
That is correct.
And it worked.
Yeah, that is correct. Unfortunately, my initial determination and the amount of fire even present on the exposure building from even with a short response, and that could be contributed by the weather, a little bit of breeze, and whatever. And the investigation is still early. I have no idea, but I would have to presume that something occurred to have that much fire this early in the incident. And it was already starting to involve the exposures on the delta side.
Yeah, you can see it pretty much. Okay, well, Todd, well, thanks for taking time out, and let's get back to your crew.
Thank you.
I'm here with Captain Jim Powers. Now, Jim was on last month. He's on this month. You're just going to be a regular, sounds like.
Okay.
Okay, now, you were here. We had a lot of fire going on, and your job essentially was you were going to check for extensions and exposures inside this building?
That's right. We were on the Bravo division, and my assignment was to first we put out the fire that was in the restaurant or the grocery store, and then after that we made an interior attack, put out any hot spots, and did a primary search.
And basically what you're trying to do is keep this from further extending and causing more damage into the adjacent structures.
That's correct. We had one more structure to the east side of this, and we were trying to keep it from getting extended into that area.
Now you have some fairly new people. What are some concerns that you have when you're moving up above a fire floor and you're looking for extension?
Well, we check to make sure that the floor is sounding it with a pike pole or an axe as we go along.
Now people are going to ask, what's that mean?
Okay, we take the tool and we're striking the floor as we're moving along on our hands and knees to make sure that the floor is there and that it's solid. Correct, and there's not any holes. We use the fire cam as well to check for any flame, or we could see a hole if there's a hole in the floor with that.
I remember a fire we were at, seems like not that long ago, where the whole floor was collapsed and you were inside. You didn't have any worries here?
No, we had been through the first floor and knew that everything was intact, and we found the interior stairway and made our way up there and then checked for any extension on the second floor.
Now we saw you broke out the windows on the second floor. Why were you doing that? People are going to say, why did they do that?
There was smoke up there that had found its way up, and we were just clearing the smoke out to increase the visibility so that we could do our primary search of the second floor as well, make sure there was nobody in there.
Well, great, Jim. I'll let you back to your crew. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.
I'm with Division Chief John Groen. John Groen's the Division Chief of Operations and my workout buddy. I couldn't resist.
Yeah, all right.
Now, we're at this fire, John. Now, a couple of questions we have. Always we get these questions. When do we go from a first alarm to second alarm, and then multiple alarms and resources that change?
Well, typically the on-scene commander will go from first alarm to second alarm when he realizes he doesn't have enough resources on hand to mitigate the situation. So as soon as he knows he has nobody left in reserve, that's when he's going to upgrade it to a second alarm. And the same thing would apply if he goes to a third alarm, fourth alarm, so on. Now, once this is going on for a while, what we typically will do is the other battalion chief that's on duty today will assess the situation, and if he needs to, he'll move crews around town to make sure we have enough crews in all areas of town to handle any other emergencies that come up.
Redeploy them throughout the city so they're strategically available to go on other calls.
That's correct. What we usually will do is we'll divide the city up into 4 quads, you know, and we'll have at least one crew in each one of those quads. So we'll have one in the northwest and northeast and so on. So
now, what happens when we get to a larger fire, third alarm, fourth alarm? What changes as far as bringing in other departments into Sioux Falls?
Yeah, once we go to a third alarm call, what that means is we'll start activating some mutual aid. So we'll have one more unit from Sioux Falls respond to the scene, and we'll also have 2 units coming from 2 of the surrounding communities. And the same thing with the fourth alarm, same thing with the fifth alarm.
So people don't have to worry. If we have a major fire, we always have coverage. It might be a little more limited, but we always have someone available to respond to medical calls and other fires.
Yeah, that's correct, and that's just what's in place all the time. In addition to that, we also have, we can always call back more crews too. We have reserve trucks available, so we'll call in 2 or 3 additional crews and staff up those reserve trucks if we need to.
So we had about 35, 40 firefighters here. We could always pull more people. Now, people are going to ask, what's mutual aid?
Well, what mutual aid is, it's an agreement between us and all of the other surrounding communities that abut up against our territory. if we need additional help, we call them. If they need additional help, they can call us.
So
we help each other out, share resources.
You bet, and that's the best way to do it.
Yep.
Well, great. Thanks a lot, John.
You bet.
I'm with Sam Hill of the Red Cross, and we have Sam show up with their people from the Red Cross to help us out in these fires. Tell us, how's the Red Cross get involved, and what do you provide people who have, whose homes or they otherwise have some disaster going on? What do you do?
Well, the Red Cross, we get called out to every structure fire in the counties that we operate in. And our first priority is to make sure that homeowners have everything they need for their emergency needs. So that's food, shelter, clothing, counseling, their medical needs are taken care of. So that's our primary response on a scene. But we also like to take our emergency response vehicle and we provide kind of a canteen service to firefighters.
Which is behind us right here.
Yep, there it is. So we take that out. We carry coffee and cocoa in the wintertime, water all the time, and some snacks. Figured if you guys can stay hydrated and fed, you can keep saving lives and property, and that's better for everyone in the end.
Now, you come out to a lot of fires. You're at probably more fires than our firefighters are at. How do you get notified?
911 calls us, and so we get notified through Metro Communications. The command on scene will request us, so we get called from Metro, and we have volunteers that are on call every night of the week.
Well, we're glad you're here. Hope we won't have to see you again, but we know it's inevitable. And now you mentioned one thing, but for families, you actually can put them up in a motel if needed?
Yeah, it depends on the size of the fire. You know, usually for single families, we do hotels. For larger fires, we'll open up shelters. But yeah, our goal is, you know, after all the fire trucks leave and people are still standing there in the yard, we want to make sure they're not standing there alone. And so we make sure that they can get to a hotel, or if they're going to stay with family, we make sure they have food to eat, access to it, clothes to wear, you know, those types of things.
You're just one of the important people behind the scenes for these fires that a lot of people don't know, that the Red Cross is a lot more than just respond to major incidents or disasters.
Yeah, we go to a lot of fires and people see us pull up and they're like, what's going on? Is there a tornado too? And we're like, no, sorry, it's you today. You're the disaster.
But this is a disaster for people.
Oh, absolutely. And as an organization, we'll spend more time, money, and resources responding to fires than we do any other disaster.
Well, we appreciate your help.
Cardiac disease is the #1 killer of people in the country. We're going to talk about how do we prevent that, what can we do, and we have Dr. Bruce Watt, who's with North Central Heart, and you're a cardiac interventionist.
Right, cardiac intervention.
What is that? People are going to say, well, what's that between a cardiologist? What's the difference?
Well, a general cardiologist, we're all general cardiologists, and then some of us go on to subspecialize in different fields of cardiology. And for interventional cardiology specifically, that is treatment of blockages of the coronary arteries to the heart with stents and balloon techniques. And
to open those vessels
to open up those vessels, yes.
Okay, now when we talk about cardiac arrest and sudden cardiac arrest, what happens to the heart when basically someone goes into a cardiac arrest?
Well, a cardiac arrest is basically a terminology defining simply that, the heart arrests. It stops beating. And with a cardiac arrest, the heart is no longer mechanically beating, but the real problem is there's complete pandemonium of the electrical system of the heart. It's fibrillating.
So we got our heart models here. So there's an electrical rhythm that runs across the heart and makes it beat.
Right. Normally the atrium, which we have two upper chambers, the attics of the heart, and the ventricles, the receiving chambers of the heart, beat in coordinated fashion, 1-to-1, bum, 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 bum. And that's electrically coordinated.
Okay.
Those electrical fibers can be thrown into disarray in all of the electrical fibers of the heart muscle in a situation of cardiac arrest or cardiac fibrillation. And that's where the whole idea behind a synchronized shock of the heart to resynchronize that electrical activity.
With our defibrillator.
With our defibrillator.
Okay. And how does that work then? Does that just essentially just take all the electrical activity or all the electrical impulses off the heart and we're hoping it restarts again?
Right. Essentially, we try to coordinate and reset the heart so that our own intrinsic pacemaker, which is an electrical activity within the heart, takes back over and resynchronizes the heart. So it's back into a regular rhythm.
And now when we do that with our public access defibs that throw them on real quick, shock the patient, what are the variables that determine the success of that happening?
Well, the quicker we can get to the patient, the quicker that we can resynchronize before the heart has been in that rhythm for very long, the better. Because after the heart has been in fibrillation for periods of over 4, 5, 6 minutes, we start to develop acidosis and acid buildup in the body, low oxygen states in the body. That makes it very hard to get the defibrillator to work. But if we're fortunate enough to get to a patient early, they're at a sporting event, such as happened recently in this community. Right. If someone has a defibrillator right on hand and gets right to that patient and recognizes that the patient has no pulse and that this is a cardiac arrest, applies the AED, and it shocks the patient within that first 2 to 4 minute period, you have an extremely high success of saving that patient's life.
So time is really critical to saving cardiac muscle.
Time is critical to saving cardiac muscle, and it's also crucial to saving brain tissue. After the heart has not pumped effectively, and if there was no CPR, at 4 minutes it starts to become the break point to start having neurologic damage. So that's also just as key as to get the heart restarted, get circulation started, so that the brain gets blood flow.
Now now if we get a cardiologist on board to talk to us about this, what are some of the key symptoms people need to realize that they should seek immediate attention from 911?
Well,
not from cardiac arrest, but just cardiac symptoms.
Cardiac symptoms. Cardiac symptoms, it's kind of the best thing to remember is if you see that antacid commercial of a middle-aged man clutching his chest and looking for an antacid, that's the wrong thing to look for. If you're having those kind of symptoms, if you're having chest discomfort that's an excruciating pressure, sometimes even a light pressure, but something unlike anything you've ever had, that effectively signals your brain that there's something going on that's different. Tightness into the neck, down to the arm, through to the back, associated with unexplained sweating or sudden onset of shortness of breath. Those would be key symptoms to really get in and be seen emergently.
For women, different symptoms?
Very, very often different symptoms, very often similar symptoms, but unexplained sweating, shortness of breath, pain in the arm, pain in the upper abdominal area, sometimes can all signify heart disease.
And it's better to call 911 and seek treatment rather than try and tough it out.
Absolutely. The biggest mistake we see is very typically the patient didn't want to bother their spouse, didn't want to wake them up, and then the following morning comes in when they've had pain all night long and the heart attack has already occurred. We need to get to that heart muscle to open up a blocked artery, as we can see on the model here with the heart. This is a representation of an artery. If there's a blockage of the artery to the heart, the muscle dies and irreversibly is damaged after about the 4-hour mark. So we need to get there.
Now there's, this might be a little advanced, but when we talk about STEMIs and the window time that we're looking at, could you just briefly explain that to a firefighter who's coming on your road?
Well, the STEMI, ST elevation myocardial infarction is what STEMI stands for. The whole protocol there is what we in the American College of Cardiology are trying to get to is door to balloon time. So the faster the paramedics, the firemen get the patients to us, once they hit that door, we like to get to the cardiac catheterization lab, in through the artery, and a balloon inflated in 60 minutes or less. And that's been a nationwide goal that we've been trying to establish.
So people need to recognize, something's wrong, contact 911 early to start working on that 60-minute window time that's really tight.
It's tight. It's tight. And especially from the time that they show up in our department, we really got to get that 60-minute window. It's a 2-hour window. You know, if you've got an hour transport, you're still trying to aim for that 2 to 2.5 hours, as opposed to in the field thrombolytics, which also may be a little advanced, but things that we're thinking about, drugs to help break up that clot, that may be an advantage in a very supervised situation to be giving those in the field.
So everyone needs to recognize those things. They need to realize where the defibs are when they're in a building, because they're easy to use. Talk you through it. And any other words of wisdom?
Oh, I think you've hit them all right on the head. The most important thing is know where it is. It's like anything, you know, they'll say, I know we have one, but where is it? And also, response time is key. Inactivity is the wrong move when somebody needs your help.
Take action, take it fast.
Take action, take it fast, and don't forget to call for help, 911. Don't try to do it alone.
Need us before we get to you.
Right.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Watts.
Nice to see you. All right.
When we look at partnerships and how do we get these partnerships together, we have to look at the Heart Hospital of South Dakota, and more importantly, John Soderholm. Now, John, I know you're the CEO and the president, and also you do everything else. But when we started this program, you were the only one that really saw value in the long-term impact of what this could be.
Probably not as much as everybody thinks, but
I was there. I can tell you the truth.
we're in the business of taking care of people who have heart problems, and obviously if they come through the door and their heart is so damaged that we can't do our thing, that really doesn't do us any good. And so by having these out in the field, like with Mr. Sudbeck, that it was at the right time, at the right place, the AED was there, they knew how to use it. He got here within a short period of time, had a surgery almost immediately, and 5 days later, he's going home and walking around. And we met him 3 weeks after surgery that night at O'Gorman, and he's walking around like you didn't know he ever had surgery. And so without this, and without the training that the people had, he probably wouldn't be with us. And so why are we in the business? We're in the business of taking care of people, touching people, and we can't do that all in this shop. It has to happen throughout the area so that when the people get to us, that the physicians have the ability to have a good heart to work with.
So this is almost more of a, instead of where we've been before siloed, where this organization does this thing and this does this, what we've done is essentially pulled all those together and made a system out of cardiac care.
Well, we're starting at a system. And as we talked about, that these are all over eastern South Dakota.
We've topped the 1,000 mark. Becky has said we've hit the 1,000 mark.
I hope we're at the 1,000 mark. We've lost track, I think, of our count. But we have them in Iowa, we have them in Nebraska, we have them in Minnesota. So we have them quite a few places. And as you know, they're not very big and they get feet and they move around.
Yes,
and
they
so
do.
where they're all at, we're not quite sure. And as I said, you probably go on eBay, you'll find some of ours on eBay because somebody, like your fire extinguishers, picks them up and says, you know, I'd like to have one at home.
Oh, yeah.
And I hope if they stole it and took it home, I hope it works for them.
Well, John, you've been really instrumental behind this, and we have I mean, in Sioux Falls, you're the driving force behind this, and you've been so positive and I mean, when we first talked about this, it seemed kind of like a crazy idea. We're trying to get 20 in Sioux Falls. We really owe it all to you.
No. I mean, first of all, the United Way had helped us get out the first 200, I think it was.
Yeah.
Because they came up with some dollars to help.
And then we did the matching grants.
We did matching grants for churches and schools who couldn't afford $1,000. And then we've moved on from there to sell them for $1,000.
And you're doing this all, just so everyone knows, there's no profit to be made on this. You've negotiated the price down. I've watched you negotiate, and I don't want to ever negotiate against you. I've learned that. So we're not making it. I mean, these are just coming in. We're selling them basically at cost. They're going out the door, and you're covering all the storage. You're covering personnel costs. When we talked to Becky.
And the other important part of it is that the cabinets that you see them set in, they're sheet metal cabinets. They have both of our logos on them, and they're important because the first ones we sold, they were $1,000, very expensive.
Right.
And people would put them
in their desk.
In their desk,
yes.
Lock them up in a file cabinet.
In the closet.
And because they didn't want them to get legs and move. Well, but then when someone needed them, and that person who owns the file cabinet with the key couldn't find them, it's a problem. And as you know, time is heart muscle. And these need to be where they can be pulled off like a fire extinguisher and put on and go to work like that. Because if you're fiddling around for 10 minutes, it's no good. We lost heart muscle. That person gets
might
here,
not even survive.
Might not survive. And when they get here to the heart hospital, we don't have as much heart to work with as we would if we jump-started it with this device.
Well, John, I got from everybody, I got to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a great relationship that we've had.
Well, but the Sioux Falls Fire Rescue has been a great part of that, as well as the United Way to help us get started. And so there's been a lot of people that made this happen. And you need to talk to Becky, the lady that makes it happen
We'll
here.
get Becky on board next.
All right.
Great. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Got the question in from the mail. This one's from Rihanna. Rihanna lives in Baltic, South Dakota, and she's curious about public access defibrillators. She's seen them in businesses. She's seen them, wants to know, how do I get one? Well, we talked to John. Now we're going to talk to the brains behind the operation. How does someone get a public access defib? Now this is Becky Smith. Becky works at the Heart Hospital, and she is the one that is doing everything for our program. Putting them up, stacking them, shipping them. How do people get them?
Well, we have a very easy, simple program here at the Heart Hospital. They can call our main number, which is 977-7000.
Now, are you seeing a lot of people calling? Do you get calls like once a month? How often would you say you get a call?
I get probably five calls a day, at least.
The program's a success for our region. Now, what's the furthest one you've sent? Do you remember?
I have sold one in Tennessee.
Really? What's the story?
The story is it was a radio talk show host who is on at nighttime, who helps young teens who are troubled. And he had some heart issues. He does travel around the United States, and so it goes with him in his bus.
So one from our program is traveling around the country in a bus.
It is.
Now, do you get to hear the success stories, or you probably maybe don't get filtered down to you on?
Actually, I do. You know, you guys are our good eyes and ears out there in the community, and then I also have other people in Spirit Lake, Iowa, Aberdeen, Yankton, Mitchell, that call in and say, hey, we had a save last night, or did you hear about this such and such story? And they try to relay it to us as much as possible, and you know, it's just a heartwarming thing.
So yeah, and did you ever thought when you started at the Heart Hospital, now, we're not going to say when you started because I don't know, but did you ever think that you were going to be involved with a program like this that's actually really saving people's lives?
No, I didn't. Obviously, I've been here 10 years since it's been opened, and I originally didn't start with the program. I kind of started just helping shipping them out because we were busy with all the orders and getting kind of backlogged, and then I don't know, it just ended up in my lap and kind of took it over, and I love it. And you know, especially you hear about the saves locally here in town, and I know that those were from me, or from the Heart Hospital.
You've touched each defib going out,
and so
quite literally.
That, you know, that's a good feeling. I mean, if they wouldn't have had that, you just never know what could happen. Yeah. So.
Well, we appreciate all your, obviously your hard work, sweat, effort, and you've been fun to work with.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah, it has been. Well, Becky, thanks a lot for all your help.
You're welcome. Thank you. You guys do a great job too.
Well, that's kind of cool. You got to see how a 2-alarm fire works. And those fires can happen so fast, take over a whole block, and firefighters got to get in there fast. They got to get some patterns of what's going on, and they really got to control that chaos because things happen very fast in the fire scene. And you got to see those defibs. Defibs are something that you can do and save someone's life, but you got to act fast, and you got to have a defib on your site. If you don't have a defib where you're at, you got to still do CPR, but you can get a defib if you take action, make the phone calls. Heck, call us up. We'll try and get you a defib. Now, you got a couple of shout outs. This first one's from Jeremiah. Jeremiah lives in Alliance, Ohio, and he wants a shout out to the Lexington Township Volunteer Fire Department in Ohio. And Tyler is from Kansas, and he wants a shout out to the Cherokee City Fire Department, Cherokee, Kansas. Well, I hope you like the show. It's kind of fun to hang around the firehouse, see what's going on. Hope to see you next month. My name is Division Chief Jim Sideras, and you've been watching Fire Call.